This is not Minecraft, but it's hard to miss the similarities, and there's a good reason for that. This is Eldritch, and according to developer David Pittman,
Minecraft was one of a few key influences. In fact, my first prototype of an Eldritch level was built in Minecraft. Minecraft validated my personal assumption at the time that audiences could forgive simple graphics if the gameplay were great. As someone who grew up in the era where 16 by 16 pixel square tiles were the norm for 2D graphics, I felt like 16 by 16 pixel cubes were an obvious way to translate that look into 3D, and I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before.
but why am I talking about this obscure 10-year-old indie game today? The short answer is because I really enjoyed it. As an indie game developer myself, I see Eldritch as a fascinating and inspiring case study. And so I reached out to Pittman directly to ask for the full story on exactly how this game came to be. But first, what is Eldritch? Eldritch is a roguelike action stealth game with a Lovecraftian horror theme. Don't be deceived by the cozy library homeworld and the cutesy lo-fi aesthetic. This game gets real creepy real fast.
What the heck is that? Dead now. Oh, no, you're not.
To beat the game, you have to collect 3 souls from these magical books, each of which acts as a portal to an eerie, procedurally generated world. If you die, then it's game over. You lose everything except for the books you've unlocked and any currency that you've stored in the bank chest. In other words, you have to collect all 3 souls in a single life.
Difficulty and progression curve are hard to get right in any game, but especially roguelikes. I wanted some element of retained progress between runs, but if the player retained the souls, they would have no reason to revisit earlier stages on subsequent runs, and the game would have been very short. Where Eldritch significantly departed from Minecraft was our goals and the gameplay mechanics. Even in its earliest days, Minecraft clearly aspired to be a broad, open-ended game. I took the aesthetics simplicity of Minecraft and ran in the other direction, going for a narrowly focused game with a rigid structure that borrowed more from Spelunky and Bioshock and Dishonored. That ended up creating some marketing confusion because people expected a game that looked like Minecraft to also play like Minecraft.
The mechanics of Eldritch are simple and elegant. You can carry 2 items at a time, plus 1 special item which grants a passive bonus, such as this compass, which reveals the location of the level's exit. You can find various weapons scattered around the map, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. For example, the gun has long range but limited ammo, while the knife can be used indefinitely, but requires you to get up close and personal to the target. Sometimes stealth is preferable to combat. So items like the rock and bottle can be used not only as projectiles, but also to create noises that enemies will go and investigate. You can also crouch to move quietly, and peek around corners to look ahead without being seen. I won't spoil all the surprises here, but there are plenty of other interesting elements to discover as well, such as keys, fountains, ability statues, and shops. Friendly faces are rare in Eldritch, so these shops provide a welcome relief from the otherwise constant tension.
Uh-oh. There's a fish man.
Please buy something.
do the voice. I think you should do it with a glass of water. So as you're drinking, you have to talk as if you're underwater.
Please buy something.
It's hard to describe how it feels to play Eldritch, but it manages to create a very unsettling atmosphere. This is especially remarkable given the game's simplistic graphical style. But I wonder if this simplicity actually helps in this regard by removing distractions, forcing you to focus on every sound, every shape, and every trace of movement.
So, what? Oh. I can hear something in the back, like, in the distance.
One of Eldritch's greatest strengths is unquestionably its sound design. But interestingly, most of the game's sound effects find their roots in samples that are freely available online.
The way I look at sound design, any sound source, whether it's a Creative Commons Zero sound from freesound.org or a purchased sound from an expensive Hollywood library, is just a brush to paint with. I have rarely, if ever, put a WAV file that I found somewhere directly into my game. Instead, I'll take that WAV, listen to it over and over, and find the qualities I like in it, and then chop it up and EQ it, and mix it with pieces of 2 or 3 other sounds until I have the result I want.
To illustrate this, here are some of these raw samples, followed by the final sound used in Eldritch. Eldritch was developed on a limited budget with limited time, so free sound effects were an invaluable resource. That said, let's talk a little more about how Eldritch came to be. Eldritch is by no means the first game to be made by a single developer, and I'm sure we're all familiar with success stories such as Cave Story, Stardew Valley, Abacus, and of course, Minecraft. But while most other 3D games use existing engines, such as Unreal or Unity, Pittman built his own engine from scratch.
My path into the video games industry started at SMU Guildhall in Dallas, Texas. As part of their curriculum, every programmer had to write their own 3D engine. After I graduated in 2007, I continued to work on my engine as a hobby, hoping to eventually make an indie game with it.
One advantage of using a homemade engine is that it is extremely lightweight. The entire game, once extracted, is a measly 40 megabytes, most of which is dedicated to audio, which is indicative of the extreme care that has gone into making Eldritch's engine as lean as possible. The engine is also completely open source.
I'm not precious about source code, and I've never seen a good reason not to release a game's source. I had learned a lot from the source code to big games like Quake, as well as smaller games from other indie developers, and I mostly wanted to share Eldritch's source in the hope that it could be educational to someone else. It's a simple, lightweight engine, and not of much immediate use to anyone else, but there are good patterns in it. The entity component architecture and AI behavior trees are probably the things I was proudest of at the time.
With this engine already built, it became the obvious choice to use when, in 2013, Pittman had the financial opportunity to try making an indie project as a full-time gig. This is always a risky move for any developer. But did it pay off?
10 years on, Eldritch is still the most successful thing I've made independently, and I'm very proud of the game it was. But when I play it now, I can also see it as other people probably saw it at the time. The weirdly stiff first-person hands, the lo-fi aesthetic that doesn't really give Eldritch horror vibes. It was an 8-month project made by one person, and it looks like it. And it was too short, and it was too easy, but also too hard.
This last comment sounds cryptic, but it makes total sense to me having beaten the game. At first, Eldritch feels brutal and unforgiving, but once you pass a certain skill threshold and you get some powerful upgrades under your belt, the challenge is significantly diminished. Personally, I enjoyed this aspect of the game because when I reached that point, I felt like I'd earned it. I felt powerful, and the creatures that once struck fear into the heart of me now seemed like mere inconveniences. Pittman has worked on several indie titles since Eldritch, but eventually the money ran out and he returned to full-time employment. Pittman sees this as a valuable opportunity to learn from other developers though, while continuing to work on other projects in his spare time. What projects are these, you ask?
And then there's Eldritch 2. I don't have anything to share about it yet, but it's happening.
I really hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, this is very different from my usual content, so please do let me know if you want to see more like this in the future. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.